let go, delegate, focus on the outcomes. You don't have to control every single move that they make, as long as, the foundation is there, the training's been put in place, and they have an expected outcome. Everyone owns a number, right? To make sure that they have something to work towards. And let them run with it and learn. And yeah, sometimes people are going to make mistakes.
You're listening to Home Care Hindsight, the podcast where we talk with home care leaders about the big mistakes they've made and the even bigger lessons they've learned along the way. I'm David Knack, head of sales here at Zengage, and I've built a career on the idea that we learn a whole lot more from our mistakes than from our successes, which is great because I've made a lot of mistakes. I've gotten to know some of the leaders in this industry who've built amazing businesses and are super well respected. So I thought it'd be fun, instead of asking them about the great things they've accomplished, to have them tell the story of one of the biggest mistakes that they've made and how that mistake changed their thinking and the way they run their business. All right, we are back with another episode of Home Care Hindsight, brought to you by Zengage, the leading caregiver engagement platform for home care. I am joined this week by a very special guest, Jensen Jones. Jensen, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, David. Appreciate it.
It's been a long time coming. I finally wore you down and got you to come on. I'm so happy that you're here. For people who aren't familiar with you, how would you introduce yourself?
So I always like to start with my core values first, so people get a sense of who I am. So let me just start there. My personal core values are family, education, and service to others. I've actually translated that into the core values of our business of community education and service to others. And so I live by those values as my guiding light. And when I look at senior care, as really my calling is senior care and care for vulnerable populations. And my calling to it is really, it's not me providing the care, but I have been blessed to be able to connect folks within the industry, agency to agency, agency to resource partners, to help elevate their level of care and the way they perform in the home care space. And I'm also the CEO of Home Care CEO and Jensen Morgan & Jones LLC.
I want to tell you, nobody has come on my show before and been like, before I introduce myself to people, let me tell you what my core values are. And so, tell me how that, came to be as kind of a core part of how you think about yourself and your business and, kind of your way of existing in the world and stuff.
Yeah. So, I come from a large, close-knit family. And I would say the values really came into play in 2014 when my dad was diagnosed with stage 4 stomach cancer. I was working, I was a big area, I was flying all over the place. I was a full-time MBA student at that time, and I have my wife and my kids, taking dad to chemo, trying to keep it all together. And, being a service to others means being able to be present and support folks. And I was stretched so thin that I couldn't. And so I had to make a decision to free up some of my time. And it was based on those values. I'm going to take care of my dad. My education was important. I was going to finish my MBA. And I knew that I wasn't being a service to those in the organization I was working in at the time, just because I was stretched so thin. So I made the hard decision to leave that organization to focus on those top two core values and take care of my dad.
I think that story and realizing, okay, I'm not living as this fully integrated person who's aligned with my values. And, that creates all kind of cognitive dissonance, and you don't feel good about the way that you're showing up to work or for your family or anything like that. And so I think a lot of our listeners can resonate with, people get into this business typically because it is a place where they can show up and be fully themselves and make a big impact. But the irony of home care is it is such a mess operationally so much of the time, and it's frequently the case that there's so many things on fire in the business that you have entered this business to be fully present, and there are days where you feel less fully present than you've ever been in your day-to-day. I'm sure you see that in the folks that you work with.
Yeah. I mean, it's one thing if you're sitting behind a computer all day. It's another thing when you add humans into the equation, right? And humans are based on emotion, and we're also really in it's the hospitality business. We're taking care of folks. And so, there's a lot of gray for sure.
Yeah.
And expectations of quality and standards. And so, yeah, there's a lot of moving parts, a lot
Yeah.
of moving parts.
Yeah. All right. I do this thing called "What kind of person are you?" And in order to ask you the question, "What kind of person are you?" I have been curious for a long time. Why Paisley?
I get asked that quite a bit. I don't know if I've ever actually shared this with anyone. So Paisley, so I have a picture of my dad from in the 70s, and he has like, it was just, he looked so cool in it. He had like this cool blue Paisley shirt with this brown leather vest and bell bottom jeans with his fro out, and it always is just stuck. And so I think it really is kind of an homage to him, and I just kind of think about that photo. I don't know. So I wanted it incorporated in the logo, and I love it.
Well, I love that. I'm a big fan of big patterns myself. I'm normally a fish shirt kind of guy. I don't know the reason for that, but I always like seeing you at events because I am always confident you're gonna be wearing a crazy pattern shirt that I'm gonna really like. Okay, well,
Appreciate it.
Jensen, you're here for your fashion sense. You're also here because you've got a big network full of home care owners and operators who trust you with, a lot of advice on how to run their business and do operations and all that kind of stuff. So you've
Uh,
clearly accomplished a lot, but I don't bring people on here to talk about their successes. Instead, I bring people on the show to talk about the big mistake that they made in their business that changed the way that they think about their business and their life and all that kind of stuff. So, Jensen, what's your big mistake?
so my big mistake, oh man. So when I first took over in 2023, I was just like, how cool is this that I get to work with, exclusively with this community of home care owners that are growing and scaling their businesses, and I get to be a part of this think tank, this small community of successful folks. And I kept thinking that in my head as I was going along, is like, this is such a cool little community. But then it finally clicked because the nuance was the word exclusive, and that is not aligned with who I am. I was like, I want to be accessible. So I need to get rid of that exclusivity and be able to start sharing these resources with agencies even outside of home care CEO community. And that really helped launch us looking at even the groups differently. I mean, just because you're in one revenue group doesn't mean that you don't or connect with other people in those higher revenue groups. We try to connect our resource partners as frequent as often with our members as well. I was really protective in the beginning of who our members were because it's like, again, exclusivity. I didn't want this list to get out and all of a sudden they're getting all these phone calls. But in the end, really, we have all these really exceptional owners out there, and we're able to celebrate within the community, but I think it needs to be amplified for the things that they're doing. We have a lot of members as part of HCOA boards, working with legislators, talking around the country, getting all kinds of recognition. And so I've changed that model. I'm not the face of home care CEO, our members are. And so
Yeah.
I want to celebrate that. And so I've just taken a different approach to say, let's amplify their voices. They're all over the country. And if there's an owner out there that happens to see a post or something about one of our members and they happen to be in the same market and have a question on something, they now have that connection or something to ask them to be able to learn from them. And
Yeah.
so I've shifted it from keeping it closed to I really want to open it up and be accessible to everybody.
Yeah. Well, and I like that you guys were developing, okay, we need to make sure that these groups are useful to each member, right? There's
Uh-huh.
people who are doing 2 to $4 million a year, and they're going to have different sets of problems and initiatives and stuff that they're working on than somebody who's doing $10 or $15 million a year in revenue. And so it makes sense that you guys have this kind of stratification of, you know, in general, these folks talk to each other who are their peers. But it sounds to me like it kind of had the unintended consequence of, oh, well, unless you're doing XYZ in revenue, you're not a fit for what home care CEO has to offer. And there was a moment that you kind of like took a step back and realized, oh, I've not been operating this on purpose in alignment with my values, but the unintended consequence is like the sort of thing we've created has the feeling of, though it's exclusive and it's not open to other people unless they fit, our fraternity secret handshake kind of qualifications.
That's exactly right. Yeah, it just felt, I was looking at it. I don't want it to feel transactional. It's all about relationships, really, and connection for us. So yeah, I would say that's a good way to look at it. It's definitely not a closed fraternity for
Yeah.
folks. I mean, if I would help as many agencies as we could to the best of our ability, if I could. So
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about when you're working with members of Home Care CEO Forum or your clients, how you kind of help them navigate this values, mission, like culture kind of conversation within their organizations. Like I'm sure you work with people all the time who are like, okay, well, we've grown to XYZ rate and realized that these parts of our culture and our identity and our values kind of got left by the wayside because we were so focused on these initiatives that we turned around and realized like we'd kind of left this kind of hollow core of like, okay, well, who are we and why are we doing this in the first place?
yeah, it's interesting. So our groups are mastermind groups. They are truly peer to peer,
Yeah.
like learning groups. So it's not me saying, "Oh, put this structure in place." It's just being exposed to all these different organizations that have these exceptional cultures. We were out visiting. I've been able to visit twice now, and it's felt the same way both times. Senior One Care, Kyle and Carl Bosom out there in South Bend, Indiana. And you get there and, you get greeted and everybody just seems like they're on the same, or not seems, they're on the same page and they all speak the same language and they all understand what their goals are. But they also have fun in the office and they're able to be
Mm,
candid with each other. And both times that I've been out there to visit and I've left, I've honestly been like, man, I want to work here. Like South Bend, I don't know if I can make the move, but I'll tell you what, I really, I would love to work at this organization. We were just in Cincinnati visiting Aaron Stapleton over at Trinity Home Care, and it's hard to describe. It was phenomenal. He had said something when we were in his organization saying that we want folks to feel like they are a guest in our home and we want to treat them that way. I'll tell you what, if you guys ever want to have an exceptional experience, go visit Aaron out there in Cincinnati. It was just phenomenal. Again, team was all on the same page. They're communicating the same way, living by their values, really prioritizing that hospitality towards their clients and everyone in the office. Just such a strong culture. Again, left feeling like I would love to work at a place like this. And when you get
mm,
to visit all these different organizations and see those cultures and you look at them and you're thinking, and that we collect growth rates and data and benchmarking for our members as well too, so they can compare for themselves. But these organizations are growing exponentially. We had half a dozen last year grow over 100% in revenue, which is just phenomenal.
yeah.
So really it's what I would say is it's not me saying these are the things you should do. It's us saying these are the things that I've seen other organizations do. And if it's going to work for you within your culture, still the good stuff and put it within your office and let that spread.
Yeah. One of the things that you said about Senior One Care there in South Bend is that they're having fun. And I think that can kind of sound like, it's not necessarily possible within home care sometimes. Like it's good work, it's meaningful work, but it's like it's hard work and it feels hard. And I think like while all that's true, and while this is always going to be a pretty chaotic space for a lot of reasons, right? It's like hospitality and
Sure.
logistics and healthcare kind of all rolled into one turducken. But like I think the idea that you can create a culture in a pretty sizable organization. I mean, they've got multiple locations, they've got a
Mhm.
lot of clients, they've got a lot of caregivers, but to be able to maintain that sense of like levity and this is such serious
Yeah.
work that we can't take it too seriously. I think really stands out as like, man, that's what I think of as like great culture in home care.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay, let's talk about something now that's underrated. The industry tends to overlook it. You think it's way more valuable than people generally see it to be.
I'm going to go back to culture, my friend. I can say since my involvement in home care CEO, so started off as a member when I was operating, then facilitated for a few years and now own it. But since late 2017, 2018, I can say a common thread that I've seen across the board is culture. It's those agencies that have very clear values and they don't just have it on the wall. They actually live those values, and it's their guiding post in being successful. And everyone understands those values. They know the values. One thing that I do sometimes with my one-on-ones when I visit agencies, one of my questions is, what are your company's values? And I can kind of dictate how well an agency is living by those values just by asking whether or not they actually know what those core values are of the
Yep.
organization or not. So I would say that is definitely a common thread that I think sometimes gets underrated. And like you said, I mean, it creates an environment of consistency, of expectation. And so I think it allows that breathing room for you to have fun within that, knowing that you guys are all rowing in the same direction
Yeah.
and focused on the same goals. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think there's kind of like a couple of challenges with the culture thing. Like job one is let's get our office team to be aligned that these are our values and this is our culture and this is who we are as a team, and have them, live those things out. And this is like baseline stuff, right? I mean, this is like
Hmm.
the way that we talk about caregivers, because there are certainly, as hard as this business is and as challenging as retention can be, and all we know that managing a team of caregivers is not easy, but it is a reality of this business. And preventing that kind of negativity and cynicism around those interactions with caregivers is like job one, I think, a lot of times, of like, okay, how do we create an office culture that thinks positively of caregivers, that believes that they can be great at their jobs instead of just constantly being negative about that. And so what are the kinds of ways that you see, I mean, on down to the scheduler and the recruiter, like the kind of front line of the office team, how we create good culture there? And then I want to go next to like, okay, how do we scale that out to 150, 200, 300 caregivers?
Yeah, and when we talk about values, it's repeating those things too. And I was just having a conversation with one of the group members about intent, like starting with good intent, right? We can't necessarily control if a caregiver is calling out or if there's an angry client or whatever, but we can control how we respond. And so, really, what it comes down to is, okay, let me start with good intent that this person's not just calling out to call out,
Yep.
and find out what the actual issue is. And then we'll look at the solutions for that issue. Here's an example I have, I thought was just phenomenal. Complete Care at Home out in Santa Barbara, Carolyn and Jason. They had a caregiver that called out, and it was the flat tire, right? And everyone
Yep.
says, oh, they always call out for these flat tires. And so they told the caregiver, they said, okay, so you're on the side of the road, stay there and we'll come get you. Are you still willing to go to your client's home? And if we figure out the car situation, the caregivers, of course, because we have to understand they're economically fragile, right? So if they
Yep.
lose a half day of pay, that's a big deal. And so they drove the caregiver to the client's home. Carolyn then goes, tows the car, gets the tire fixed and replaced, and takes it to the client's home and parks it in the driveway and says, your car is in the driveway when your shift is over, for you to get home.
Mm,
That's huge. I
it
mean,
is.
how many people live by those kinds of values and really follow the thing that they want to do, which in the end is to take care of their clients, but also take care of your caregivers, right? Those are your two main funnels, so your clients and
Mhm.
caregivers. And so it wasn't just reflective on the client to make sure they're taken care of. They also reflected on their caregivers. And believe me, that one caregiver has probably told that story who knows how many times to the different caregivers around the area.
Yeah. I was just on a webinar, and one of the things we talked about is I'll hear from agencies from time to time. These caregivers, they're just not loyal. They'll leave for an extra 25 cents an hour down the road, and that always strikes me as like, okay, that means your only value you're delivering to your caregivers is hours in exchange for pay, and it's transactional, it's a commodity. And that story you just told is, like, that caregiver is not at risk of being lost for an extra 25 cents an hour down the road.
Right. It's funny too. I was speaking with Greg over at Pansy Home Care. He was sharing some feedback on one of our in-person visits, and he said something that still it has stuck with me, and it's really made me look at things a lot differently, even when working within agencies. And we were talking about takeaways, and one of his takeaways during the meeting was, he said, "Are our caregivers our biggest fans? And if not, then how do we turn them into our biggest fans?" And to me, I was like, "Oh my goodness, Are our caregivers our biggest fans? And then that can
Mm.
also translate into our office staff. Are they our biggest fans? Right? Our clients, are we their biggest fans? So, what are the things that you need to back into to create that type of culture and environment where people are your biggest fans and they're saying the good things about you in those rooms that you're not in?
Are we our caregivers, are they our biggest fans?
Yeah.
Shout out Greg, friend of the show. Um, no, that's really good. And that kind of like, I mean, that fundamentally, like, that's a core value, right? Of like, we should be providing such an excellent level of service to our caregivers that they become our brand, right? They are walking billboards advertising what an amazing company we are, because the people closest to our clients are unbelievably happy to work here, and you know wouldn't leave us for just about anything. One of the I always think about the Gallup Q12 survey. That's the kind of like employee engagement survey, and one of the questions in there that I think home care really under delivers on is the mission of my company makes me feel my job is important. And I think the fact that being a caregiver is inherently a really valuable act to do, it leaves us with, well, they're doing meaningful work. We don't need to add like layer meaning on top of that. But the fact is, like, you can be a caregiver for any agency and still do a job that is meaningful. But is the company that you work for adding additional value and meaning to the work that you're doing? And I think in a lot of cases, it's not, right? I go where the hours are, I go where the clients are. That relationship with the client is so important. That client caregiver fit is so important. And so, what's the agency really going to add that's useful on top of that? But I think there's so much that can be done to, make our caregivers our biggest fans.
Yeah. We were recently talking about, how do we have our agencies not be looked at as a commodity for
Mm,
our caregivers, right?
mm,
And, one of the things that we had talked about, and it's also included in that whole onboarding interview process. And I had spoke about this before, the difference between screening in and screening out. Whereas, if you're focused on screening bad people out all the time, you start living in that culture of finding reasons to not include people in your organization.
mm.
And to me, an interview is from that first interview all the way through until they actually get in front of that client. You have the decision whether or not you want to actually put them in front of that client. And if there's
Yeah.
any point in time through that process that they're not fitting within your culture and values or displaying the things that you want to see, you don't have to put them in front of that client. But if you're screening in during the interview process, you're talking about your culture, you're talking about your values and expectations, and finding out if that person has similar core values, right? Because if your organization has 3 to 4 core values and someone can attach to 1 to 2 of them, ideally all four, but if they have a shared value, that immediately creates a connection with your agency and organization that maybe another agency is not even talking about their values or living by those values for them to feel a connection to that agency, right?
Yeah. You were gonna give me a quick hit on something that you think's overrated.
Overrated. Yeah. So, and I would say this is of late because we'll just say it. I think top line revenue sometimes is overrated of late because prices are going up. We're charging more for services because we're having to pay more. And I've seen agencies that have had census levels that were flat or even gone down a little bit, but have increased in revenue.
Yeah.
But if your census isn't growing, are you really growing? I don't know if that's a true indicator all the time if you're actually growing. So focusing on that census number, I think is important as well too, and not just that top line revenue
Yeah.
because it could be misleading.
Yeah. I think a lot about like from the vendor side of things, right? We're in a industry that's going to grow rapidly, and so we're positioned really well if we do everything right. We take great care of our clients. Like, we have an amazing opportunity to grow. But I think the question is, like, how much of our growth can be attributed to the fact that this market in general is growing and more clients need these services, so businesses need more caregivers, and so more people work with us to manage all of that, versus how much is it because we are building the right fundamentals into the business that we would grow even if market conditions aren't suitable to it. And so what I'm hearing you say there is, you know, right now the whole industry is being lifted. It's kind of a rising tide lifts all boats. But, the question is which boats are ready to sail regardless of the kinds of market conditions that are in the water, as it were.
Mm,
I'm badly mixing
mm.
metaphors there. Let's move to the next segment where I
A
ask
little
you. We
corporate talk there.
That's right. Yeah, we've got to get some more synergies here. Um, yeah, let's get a good sense of alignment here on that. Okay. What's a little mistake that you see home care owners make all the time, and if they quit, it'd make their lives or their businesses like 10 times better?
Oh my god, that depends. There's several. I would say one of the key mistakes that I see happen is just letting go of control, especially when you're growing. You're going to hit a certain point where you can't keep your hands on everything. And so this again kind of goes back to culture and trusting your people. Let go, delegate, focus on the outcomes. You don't have to control every single move that they make as long as, the foundation is there, the training's been put in place and they have an expected outcome. Everyone owns a number, right? To make sure that they have something to work towards. And let them run with it and learn. And yeah, sometimes people are going to make mistakes. But I can probably guarantee with almost, I would say 100% confidence that all of us have gotten to where we were based off of learning lessons from mistakes we've made in the past. And if we prevent others from being able to learn from their mistakes, we're not really
Yeah.
helping them grow as people, I don't think. So,
Yeah.
and another mistake, a little mistake I would say that I see all the time too, and this kind of goes along with it, is that when we're looking at our organization and we have these positions, what I've seen organizations do is, you'll have this scheduler, recruiter, and you'll have this person sitting in that chair that has these different skills and abilities, and they'll start creating that chair around the person. Right. So they'll kind of define that chair to say, okay, well, David knows how to do this too. So we'll put this on him, put this on him, put this on him. But when you look at scaling your organization, I mean, you really should be able to copy paste. If I have a person sitting in a chair, Dave, and I say, we're promoting you, and then I'm putting someone in behind you, and I have to start shuffling around some of those tasks and responsibilities, that's not a scalable model. I need to
Mm,
define the chair and say, these are the responsibility of this chair and expected outcomes. And let's find a person that it has the skill, will, and ability to meet these expectations. And if they have additional skills, that's great. We can have them on projects. We can start cross training them for maybe another position or a promotion. But, I've seen it where agencies have kind of been devastated by having someone with a lot of like key tribal knowledge or responsibilities that maybe shouldn't even been in that chair leave the organization, and they're scrambling to fill that void. And then the immediate reaction is like, let's just get a butt in the chair to fill it because we're all over the place now. And that's
yeah.
just the smart way to scale your business is to clearly define that chair and what those outcomes are. And then to also leverage the strengths of that person coming in that might be able to accomplish things outside of that. So
Mm.
that's some other advice I would give for sure.
Yeah, that's really useful, and that was gonna be kind of my follow-up question is like, okay, well, how do you define the chair, but still, like, harness all of the upside of these really excellent employees that come in to do, like, a scheduler role, and then all of a sudden you find out that they've got, like, unbelievable, like, with clients and so you wanna kinda stack that on top of their role too, and so, like, yeah, how do you think about, like, okay, we've got these unicorns in the business who are unbelievable. I think of,
Hmm.
like, John Bennett has a admin in his office named Lexi who's amazing, and he's, like,
Hmm.
he and I were chatting about how can we continue to develop Lexi's role, but then one day when we have to backfill for her role, then what?
Right. Yeah, no, totally. And so, like, even in that example, Lexi is amazing, by the way. She still has her core definition of what her role is, right?
Yep,
To say, okay, now she's getting these other skill sets. So we will be able to move her in. But then when she has to get rid of this core position, at least we know we can train to it, set some expectations around it, and then, it's not leaving John with this big gaping hole.
yeah,
There will be a little bit of a hole because I don't know how she does everything. I actually had a call with him a couple of weeks ago asking Lexi how she organizes all that and gets all that done. But yeah, so I would say, if you define that, but you can always cross train and leverage other people's strengths. And you
yep,
also have to respect that some positions there's just not very much bandwidth for them to be doing these other things as well too. So it's not
Yeah.
just like, well, you're good at this, so I'm going to make you do it and pile on another 10 hours to whatever you're
Yeah.
already doing during the week.
Yeah.
You have to say, how much bandwidth do you have? Let's come up with a plan. Or if we have these people working on this certain initiative, can you be a part of that or provide feedback and just, have them be a part of that game planning so they still feel like they have ownership of it, but don't stretch your people. So we punish the producers, right? Just give them
Yeah.
more and more and more and more. And
Yeah.
that's not necessarily healthy.
One of the questions that I have is about kind of this idea of like tribal knowledge, and I call it the like got hit by a bus problem of like if this person got hit by a bus, let's use me for example. There's a lot of stuff nobody else in the business would know because it all lives in my head, and I am like, this is just a therapy session now, Jensen. Sorry, but as we're developing on our team this like scheduling AI, and we're pulling data from the scheduling system and serving up matches to say, hey, could this person pick up this shift? We're finding that there's a lot of secret tribal knowledge that only exists inside of people's brains. Our AI can't get to it because it's not written down anywhere. And each time somebody says that's a bad match, we're like, well, why? Help us make the model better. But it strikes me that there's a huge amount of like not written down anywhere, secret tribal knowledge that's siloed and compartmentalized in different functions within the business. And so, how do you see businesses start to like document that stuff and get it out of
Mhm.
people's brains so that if I get hit by the bus, that the business can still carry on and that I'm actually replaceable at the end of the day.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So when I work on one-on-one with agencies, we create what I call playbooks. And the playbooks, it's funny. So I've seen where you have, the owners like dictating this manual. They look more like manuals at that point. It's like, oh, this is what you're doing, this is what you're doing. But they're not the ones who are actually doing the day-to-day. So when I'm working with folks, we actually start with the person who's in the position. They're the one to
Hmm.
have all the knowledge and everything around that.
Yep.
And so there is a framework, but basically it's just like, what is your job? Define what that is. So let's go through what are some daily key expectations, weekly, monthly, biannual, whatever that is. And you can high level that on these are the expectations. Now, if there's certain nuances within that, like for example, if you had something in your programming that you only knew how to do,
Yeah.
within that playbook, you would just create an appendix that then would take you to that section that says, these are the steps to actually get this thing done. So if
Yep.
David's out of the office for 2 months in France, we can go to David's playbook, know what his responsibilities were, and some of these nuances of like only things that David does, we can go through and
Yeah.
there's a step by step that will walk us through it. So we create playbooks for every position. It's really easy to do on scale because you can have everybody in the office working on them at the same time because it's not
Sure.
coming from one person. When those playbooks are then created, what I did in my organization is I had the people present what that playbook is. If you can teach it, you know it. And it's
Hmm.
kind of cool because when they're building these out, they're defining their jobs. They're kind of making their own job definitions. And what I've found is that they put higher expectations on themselves than maybe what an owner or a supervisor would put on them for expected output within those playbooks of things that
Sure.
need to get done. So they'll present that. And then you can say, is this realistic? And have those conversations and then include maybe some feedback to help with efficiency within whatever that workflow is. Cause really you're kind of defining workflows through those playbooks. But it's nice because once those are built, the next person takes the seat. And what I did was say, okay, here's the playbook of what this person was doing. This is going to be your start of training. And if you learn a better way, or if we incorporate maybe tech, that's why I call them playbooks, because you can always erase a play and redesign it, right?
Yeah.
So if there's something else that gets incorporated to help with efficiency, then we'll just update that for you on this playbook and you can copy paste as you're growing various offices. You can take a playbook and say, here's how we do it over here to get these tasks and these things done for these outcomes.
Yeah.
And so it's something that's very scalable.
One of the things you said there that I think kind of ties back to the previous conversation about like culture and morale and engagement and all this kind of stuff is people having understanding what's expected of them and knowing how they stack up relative to those expectations. What I'm hearing you say is that a lot of your like the individual contributors within the office have a sense that more is expected of them or they're not quite living up to expectations, and then they present on that and the owner is like, oh, that's like way more than what I was like,
Yeah.
relative to my expectations, you are exceeding them, but you still feel like you're not stacking up relative to this like self-imposed, self-conceptualized kind of expectation. And so I think it's a good opportunity to level set on, okay, you're doing an amazing job. And there are things that you do that nobody else in the office can do. And, I didn't realize that you felt like you weren't living up to our expectations because you totally are.
Yeah. And it also works the other way around. And I've seen it where
Yeah.
someone will start working on a playbook and, my goodness, you're like, oh, okay, so point the finger inward first. Did I provide this person the training
Yeah.
and the
Yeah. Yeah.
support to do this job?
Yeah.
Because if this is how they're defining it, oh my! And so it's a big eye opener sometimes on that back end as well too. But you're right; it helps you level set. And sometimes people, we start making expectations for ourselves or thinking that there's an expectation of ourselves, and it does allow you to level set and say, you know what, that's not something that you have to worry about. That's David focuses on that. You don't have to be involved in that. And again, that helps keep things effective and efficient and will
Yep.
help open up some bandwidth in certain positions for that cross training. So
Yeah.
it gives you a lot of information having the people do it who are actually doing the job.
I've got to imagine too, that's a great way to kind of qualify for who is in a seat in the office and has real like leadership potential for being elevated to a different role down the road.
Hmm. Yeah, because you see the level of acumen based on how they structure those playbooks and even their conceptual understanding of what you're asking them to do for sure.
Yeah.
There's an activity as well that a former mentor of mine always challenged us with, and I've shared this before, is, at the end of every year, take your org chart and kind of put the names on this org chart and just wipe them off. And then look at your org chart and look at those names. And as you're looking at growing and scaling your business, can you put all those names back in the same seats in regards to where you want to take the company or not? And
Mm,
so it was always an interesting thing when I look at my team. It was kind of a weird thing to do at first, but then I thought, oh, I'd look at these names. I'm like, ugh, you know what? I think actually, I don't know why I have David scheduling because I've seen him interact and interview. He might actually be better in supporting our interview onboarding process
mm.
and everyone likes him. And he's more of a sales guy. Maybe that's the fit, or maybe that person just doesn't actually fit that chair. I think another mistake we make is hiring for the agencies we have and not the agencies we want. So, if I hire for someone to help me manage a $2 million agency, I can't really get that upset if I'm trying to grow to 5 million if that person's already at capacity and what they can do to contribute to the organization.
Okay. Well, we've talked about a lot of mistakes and stuff that's gone wrong, but I like to end every episode on a high note. So, what's something that's happened lately in your business you're really proud of?
Oh man, we've had so many wins. One thing I'm really proud of, taking over in 2023, we've doubled our census of members since the end of this last year. So in 2 years, we've been able to double the number of members, which is great. We had more members graduate into um, new groups this year than we've ever had since I've been involved in the organization, which is fantastic. Last year, we had 84% of our members grew by an average of 19.53%. Like I told you, we had six that grew over 100% last year. So just huge. I just feel like when my people are winning, then I'm winning. So I don't know if it's necessarily wins for me. We also brought on Casey Rosin, who is facilitating our strategic growth group, which has been a big help. And she has actually been operating in a home care management organization. So we're launching a home care management group. As I'm seeing, we're seeing more people wanting to add that as a revenue stream in the organization. So that group will be launching soon. So I'm excited about that. Um, I don't know, man. There's just a lot of positive things happening right now in the business, and I'm just pinching myself.
Yeah. Well, anytime I talk to any of your home care CEO members, one of the recent masterminds always comes up. And one thing they never talk about is you, which is I think means you're not the face of the business. So congrats. But they're always talking about like the kind of like, I mean, the masterminding that takes place there where they're sharing like best practices and what's working for them and what they're running into challenges with. And so you've cultivated a place where people can really like be transparent and vulnerable about what's going on in their business and leave with like actionable stuff that they can do to move the needle forward. So, congrats to you
Yeah.
guys on all of that. Before we get out of here, what do you want to plug?
I would just say this. If you're curious about what we do in order to help support agencies across the country, I mean, we're all over the country, even including in Hawaii, feel free to reach out. You can either go to homecareco.com. You can email info@homecareco.com. You can email me directly, jensen@homecareco.com. Email casey@homecareco.com. Again, we want to be accessible. If you're in the season to want to become part of the community, that's great. If you're just wanting to learn more about it, that's fine too. We're not a hard sell. We really want folks who are in that season of learning, growing, having some accountability and helping establish connections and relationships to help grow their organizations. And sometimes people are in the season, sometimes they're not. But we also look at ourselves as a resource to be able to be a bridge to connect folks to people like you at Zengage and our other resource partners that we've partnered with. Our resource partners get vetted to make sure that, again, I'm more mission driven than money driven, and so our resource partners are very mission driven individuals, really trying to help make a positive impact in the industry as well too. So again, if there's any resources, connections, or you just want to learn more about the groups and how we support, feel free to reach out.
Awesome. Well, Jensen, thank you so much for coming on the show today. It's been a ton of fun.
I appreciate it. Thanks, Dave.
On behalf of the team here at Zengage, thanks for listening to the show. We'll be back next week with another episode, so be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts on Spotify or Apple or YouTube. Leave us a rating while you're there. It helps other people find the show. If you have comments on the show, drop me a line, david@zengage.com. Would love to hear from you, chat with you there.